Good morning, Internet. How you doing today? It's Jeremy Reads Aloud, self-help books. And on this stream, I read books of self-improvement for your benefit. We're now on page 88 of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. The book is written by Robert Moore and Doug Gillette. I encourage you to get the book yourself. Click the link in the description for the Amazon link. We're on page 88, chapter 6, The Warrior. On page 88, we're reading the subheading, The Shadow Warrior, the Sadist and the Masochist. And before I begin, we're going to deal with some pretty mature content. So if you have any young children in the room with you while listening to this stream or this video, I would appreciate if you would tell your kid to go get some cereal in the kitchen, or have him or her play his or her Minecraft or Pokemon game away from this computer during this video, because we're going to deal with some very mature, potentially offensive content for some sensitive viewers. So young children, please leave. Wait for a few seconds. All right. They should be gone by now. The Shadow Warrior, the Sadist and the Masochist. Here we go. The warrior's energy detachment from human relationships leads to real problems, as we're suggesting. These problems become enormously hurtful and destructive to a man when he is caught in the warrior's bipolar shadow. In the movie The Great Santini, Robert Duvall plays a Marine fighter pilot who runs his family like a miniature Marine Corps. Most of his remarks and behavior toward his wife and children are depreciating, critical, commanding, and designed to put distance between him and the family members, who keep trying to relate to him lovingly. The destructiveness of this way of quote-unquote relating eventually becomes so obvious to everyone, especially to the older son, page 89, that there can no longer be any hiding from the fact that Santini's sometimes violent behavior results from his own inability to be tender and genuinely intimate. The great Santini, under the power of the sadist, constantly has his emotional quote-unquote sword out, swinging at everyone, his daughters, who need to be treated like girls, not Marines, his oldest son, who needs his guidance and nurturing, and even his wife. There is a terrible scene in the kitchen when everything finally erupts. Santini physically attacks his wife, and then the kids attack him. Though detachment in itself is not necessarily bad, as we've said, it does leave the door open to the quote-unquote demon of cruelty. Because he is so vulnerable in this area of relatedness, the man under the influence of the warrior needs urgently to have his mind and his feelings under control. Not repressed, but under control. Otherwise, cruelty will sneak in the back door when he is not looking. There are two kinds of cruelty: cruelty without passion and cruelty with passion. An example of the first kind is a practice that Nazis used in training the SS officer corps. The candidates for the corps would raise puppies, caring for them in every way, tending them when they were sick, feeding and grooming them, playing with them. Then, at an arbitrary moment decided upon by the trainer, these men were ordered to kill their puppies, and to do so with no sign of feeling. This training in unfeeling sadism evidently worked well, because these same men became killing machines that manned the death camps, systematically, without emotion, torturing and murdering millions of human beings while still thinking of themselves as quote-unquote good fellows. A contemporary image of the warrior turned passionless killing machine is, of course, Darth Vader, from the Star Wars saga. It is alarming how many boys and adolescents identify with him. In this same connection, it is also alarming how many of these young men become members of survivalist and neo-Nazi groups. Sometimes, though, the sadist's cruelty is passionate. In mythology, we hear of avenging gods and of the wrath of God. In India, we see Shiva dancing the dance of universal destruction. In the Bible, Yahweh orders the fiery destruction of whole civilizations. Early in the Old Testament, we see this angry and vengeful God reducing the planet to mud through a great deluge, killing off nearly every living thing. Page 90. Moving on. The warrior, as an avenging spirit, comes into us when we are very frightened and very angry. A kind of bloodlust, as it is called, comes over men in the stressful situation of actual combat, as well as in other stressful life situations. There is a scene in the movie Apocalypse Now in which the crew of the American gunboat, in a sampan boarding incident, panics and murders everyone on the sampan. Only after their fear has subsided do they realize that the people they have just murdered in their quote-unquote battle frenzy were innocent villagers going to market. A similar scene is presented in the movie Platoon, when the GIs open fire on a helpless Vietnamese village. This kind of savage outburst has haunted Americans ever since the incident at My Lai, in which Lieutenant Calley, apparently terrified and angry, ordered the murder of every man, woman, and child in the village. That the sadistic warrior actually loves such carnage and cruelty is made explicit again in Patton, when General Patton looks out over the smoking remains and the charred corpses of a great tank battle between the American and German forces, and sighs, God, I do love it so. Along with this passion for destruction and cruelty goes a hatred for the quote-unquote weak, of the helpless and vulnerable, really the sadist's own hidden masochist. We've already mentioned the slapping incident in Patton's career. We see the same kind of sadism displayed in boot camp in the name of supposedly necessary quote-unquote ritual humiliation, designed to deprive recruits of their individuality and put them under the power of a transpersonal devotion. Far too often, the drill sergeant's motives are the motives of the sadistic warrior seeking to humiliate and violate the men put in his charge. And what can we make of the revolting practice of the Turkish army in World War I, when, after taking an Arab village, the soldiers delighted in cutting open pregnant women with their bayonets, ripping out their unborn babies and hanging them around their necks? It may seem, at first, unlikely, but the sadistic warrior's cruelty is directly related to what is wrong with the hero's energy. There are similarities between the shadow warrior and the hero. The shadow warrior carries into adulthood the adolescent insecurity, violent emotionalism, and the desperation of the hero as he seeks to make a stand against the overwhelming power of the feminine, which always tends. We'll take a little break here for this illustration here. And this subheading reads, Peter Paul Rubens, Rape of Persephone, 1636 to 1638, The Prado Museum, Madrid photo, ARXIUMAS. encourage you to look at that illustration and perhaps do your own research in paintings. Pretty brutal. Moving back to what we were reading, and let's reread that. The shadow warrior carries into adulthood the adolescent insecurity, violent emotionalism, and the desperation of the hero as he seeks to make a stand against the overwhelming power of the feminine, which always tends, page 92, always tends to evoke the masochistic or cowardly pull of the hero's dysfunctional shadow. The man under the influence of the shadow warrior's bipolarity, unsure of his legitimate phallic power, is still battling against what he experiences as the inordinately powerful feminine and against everything supposedly quote-unquote soft and relational. Even in adulthood, he still feels terrified that he will be swallowed up by it. His desperate fear of this leads him to wanton brutality. We don't have far to look to see this destructive warrior operating in our lives. Sadly, we must acknowledge it in the workplace whenever our boss puts down, harasses, unjustly fires, or in many other ways mistreats his subordinates. We must also acknowledge the sadist in our homes, in the appalling statistics of wife beating and child abuse. Although we may all become vulnerable to the sadistic warrior at some time or another, there is a particular personality type that has this energy in spades, as we say. This is the compulsive personality disorder. Compulsive personalities are workaholics, constantly with their noses to the grindstone. They have a tremendous capacity to endure pain, and they often manage to get an enormous amount of work done. But what is driving their non-stop engines is deep anxiety, the hero's desperation. They have a very slim grasp on a sense of their own worthwhileness. They don't know what it is they really want, what they are missing and would like to have. They spend their lives, quote-unquote, attacking everything and everyone, their jobs, the life tasks before them, themselves and others. In the process, they are eaten alive by the sadistic warrior and soon reach burnout. We all know these people. They are the managers who stay at the office long after everyone else has gone home. And when they do finally get home, they seldom have a good night's sleep. These are the ministers, the social workers and therapists, the doctors and lawyers, who work literally day and night trying to plug the physical and psychological holes in other people, sacrificing their own lives for the sake of saving others. In the process, they really do a lot of harm, both to themselves and to those who can't measure up to their impossible standards. They can't, of course, measure up to their own standards, so they mercilessly abuse themselves. If you have to admit to yourself that you really don't take care of yourself, then you don't care, page 93. You don't care for your mental and physical well-being, and very probably the shadow warrior has got you. As we've already suggested, men in some professions are especially endangered by dysfunctional warrior energy. The military is an obvious example. What may not be so obvious is that the revolutionaries and activists of all kinds may also fall into the sadistic pull of the shadow warrior. The old saying that we become what we hate applies here. It is a sad truth that leaders of revolutions, political, social, economic, the little revolutions within the corporation or the voluntary organization, once they have ousted the tyrants and oppressors, often by violence and terrorism, become themselves the new tyrants and the new oppressors. It was often said in the 1960s that the leaders of the peace movement were just as tyrannical and just as violent as those they fought against. Salespeople and teachers, along with members of the many other professions already cited, can easily fall prey to compulsive, self-driven, workaholic patterns. Eventually, they will snap. A car salesman entered analysis after years in the business as the top salesman. Month after month, not only in his dealership, but in the whole area. Every month, with enormous self-discipline and determination, he fought and scrapped to reach the top of the heap. Then one day something collapsed inside him. He had been sensing a gradual inner wearing down and a growing fatigue, and he had often talked about feeling burned out. Then one morning, he got up and realized that he was shaking all over and feeling terrified about going to work. Pretty soon, he was not sleeping. He began having the overwhelming urge to cry at the most inappropriate times. He forced himself to go on for another several months. But finally the day arrived when everything at work, the showroom floor, the lot, his fellow workers, the customers, all seemed strangely unreal. He called his doctor and admitted himself to the hospital. The sadistic warrior had overpowered him and had eaten him alive. Shortly after this, his wife left him, claiming with some apparent justification that he had been inattentive to her. He began therapy. In the course of his therapy, he discovered the self-destructive power of his compulsiveness and how it worked to alienate him from others. And he resolved to turn over a new leaf. Page 94. Any profession that puts a great deal of pressure on a person to perform at his best all the time leaves us vulnerable to the shadow system of the warrior. If we are not secure enough in our own inner structure, we will rely on our performance in the outer world to bolster our self-confidence. And because the need for this bolstering is so great, our behavior will gravitate toward the compulsive. The man who becomes obsessed with succeeding, quote unquote, has already failed. He is desperately trying to repress the masochist within him, yet he is already displaying masochistic and self-punishing behaviors. The masochist is the passive pull of the warrior's shadow, that pushover and whipped puppy that lies just beneath this sadist's rageful displays. Men are right to fear the coward within them, even if they don't have the sense of fear, to fear their own macho exteriors. The masochist projects warrior energy onto others and causes a man to experience himself as powerless. The man possessed by the masochist is unable to defend himself psychologically. He allows others and himself to push him around, to exceed the limits of what he can tolerate and still keep his self-respect, not to mention his psychological and physical health. All of us, no matter what our walk of life, can fall under the power of the warrior's bipolar shadow in any area of our lives. It may be that we don't know when to quit an impossible relationship, a circle of friends, or a frustrating job. We all know the saying, quit while you're ahead, or learn to cut your losses. The compulsive personality, no matter what the danger sign, no matter how impossible the dream and unbeatable the foe, digs in and works harder, trying to get blood from the turnip and watching his gold turn to ashes in the end. If we are under the power of the masochist, we will take far too much abuse for far too long, and then explode in a sadistic outburst of verbal and even physical violence. This kind of oscillation between the active and passive poles of archetypal shadows is characteristic of these dysfunctional systems. You know what? I'm going to finish the chapter because we're just about near the end. On page 94, we're reading the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. Chapter 6, The Warrior. And on page 94 now, we're reading the subheading, Accessing the Warrior. We're going to end it on a positive statement here. Accessing the Warrior. If we are possessed by the active pull of the warrior's shadow, we will experience him in his sadistic form. We will abuse ourselves and others. If we feel that we are not in touch with the warrior, however, page 95, we will be possessed by his passive pull. We will be cowardly masochists. We will dream but not be able to act decisively to make our dreams come true. We will lack vigor and be depressed. We will lack the capacity to endure the pain necessary for the accomplishment of any worthwhile goal. If we are in school, we won't get our assignments done. We won't get our papers written. If we are in sales and we are assigned a new territory, we'll sit and stare at the map and the list of all the contacts we need to make and not be able to pick up the phone and start calling. We will look at the task ahead and be defeated before we start. We won't be able to, quote-unquote, leap into battle. If we are in politics, instead of being able to face the issues and the public concerns frontally, we'll duck and dive, seeking a way out of direct confrontation. If we are underpaid on the job and figure there's money enough that we are good enough to rate a raise, we'll start down the hall to the boss's door. With fear and trembling, pause in indecision before it, and turn and walk away. As we do with all of the archetypes described in this book, we all need to ask ourselves not if we are possessed by one or both poles of their shadow systems, but in what ways we are failing to access properly the masculine energy potentials available to us. If we are accessing the warrior appropriately, we will be energetic, decisive, courageous, enduring, persevering, and loyal to some greater good beyond our own personal gain. At the same time, we need to be leavening the warrior with the energies of the other mature masculine forms, the king, the magician, and the lover. If we are accessing the warrior in the right way, we will, at the same time that we are, quote-unquote, detached, be warm, compassionate, appreciative, and generative. We will care for ourselves and others. We will fight good fights in order to make the world a better and more fulfilling place for everyone and everything. Our war making will be for the creation of the new, the just, and the free. Page 95, that's all the time we have for this reading of the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, Rediscovering the Archetypes of the Mature Masculine by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. And we've just finished reading Chapter 6, The Warrior, page 95. Tune in next time. Next video, we'll be reading page 97. And the chapter will be The Magician. This is Jeremy Reads Aloud, Self-Help Books. Thank you for watching, folks. I appreciate you tuning in to watch. And leave a like if you appreciated the stream so far. And appreciate if you leave some comments and questions. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Don't forget to get the book yourself. Click the Amazon link in the description. This is Jeremy Reads Aloud, Self-Help Books, signing out till later. Young men, have a transformative week. We'll talk to you again real soon. Bye.